Story number 1. Late one chilly October evening, I was driving home from work along a familiar stretch of highway. The road was notorious for being empty and quiet at night, except for the occasional passing car. The darkness was almost calming, but that night, the calm was broken by the unexpected sight of a car stopped on the side of the road, hazard lights blinking feebly. As someone who believes in helping others, I pulled over, thinking someone might need assistance. Approaching the vehicle, I noticed the front hood popped up, suggesting engine trouble. "Hello? Do you need help?" I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet night. There was no response, and I began to feel a tinge of unease. Peering into the car, I saw it was empty, the driver's seats and back seats void of any passengers. Just as I decided to head back to my car to call for a tow truck, a harsh cough from the darkness made me spin around. Standing there was a tall, gaunt man, his clothes ragged and face obscured by the shadows. "Finally decided to stop, did you?" His voice was raspy, as if he hadn't had water in days. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Look, I just thought someone needed help," I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. The man stepped closer, his presence imposing. I noticed then the unsettling glint of something metallic in his hand. It was a large wrench, and he gripped it with purpose. "You've made a mistake," he hissed, moving closer still. The road was deserted, no cars in sight, and my phone suddenly felt incredibly far away in my car. My heart pounded in my chest as I took a step back, only to feel the cold metal of my own car behind me. It was between me and any chance of escape. I had to think fast. In a moment of sheer adrenaline, I feigned a glance over his shoulder. "Look out!" I shouted. As he instinctively turned, I darted around him, sprinted to my car. I unlocked it, slammed the door shut, and jammed the keys into the ignition. The engine roared to life just as he had realized the trick and came at me, slamming the wrench against the window. The glass held, but the loud bang it made echoed in my ears. With no time to spare, I floored the accelerator. The tires screeched, and I sped off down the highway, leaving the man cursing in the dust. My heart didn't stop racing until I saw the welcoming lights of my town ahead. I reported the incident to the police, but they never found him. I drive a different way home now, avoiding that lonely stretch of highway. That night remains a chilling reminder that not every stop is a safe one. Story number 2. On a dreary Sunday evening, I decided to take a shortcut home through an old industrial area of town. The streets were lined with abandoned factories and warehouses, relics of a once thriving district. The air was damp, and the sky had just begun to let loose a drizzle that made everything slightly blurred, like viewing the world through a dirty window. The route was faster, but as I ventured deeper, the echoes of my footsteps on the wet pavement made me keenly aware of the desolation. As I passed a particularly dilapidated warehouse, a sound caught my attention. It was the sharp clatter of something metallic striking the ground. Curious and cautious, I peered through a broken window. Inside, the warehouse was shrouded in darkness, except for a faint light that seemed to dance and flicker from a distant corner. I could just make out the silhouette of a person, seemingly engaged in some sort of frantic activity. My first thought was to leave, but a sense of responsibility tugged at me. What if someone was in trouble? Approaching the entrance, I pushed open the heavy metal door. It screeched, slicing through the quiet. The noise startled the figure, who abruptly turned to face me. It was a man, gaunt and wild-eyed, his appearance disheveled. He was not alone. Several ominous-looking metal contraptions lay scattered around him. "Who's there?" he demanded, his voice rough with suspicion. I noticed a heavy wrench in his hand, and my stomach tightened. "I heard a noise, just checking if everything's all right," I replied, my voice betraying a tremor I hadn't anticipated. The man stared at me, sizing me up with a predator's gaze. Suddenly, he charged, wrench raised in a threatening arc. Panic surged through me as I realized the danger I was in. This wasn't a person in need. It was a confrontation I had unwittingly walked into. Dodging his first swing, I stumbled backwards, nearly tripping over the debris. The man was relentless, his movements fueled by desperation or madness. Every swing of his wrench was accompanied by a grunt, each miss followed by increased frustration. My back hit a pillar, and for a moment, I thought I was done for. But adrenaline lent me clarity, and I noticed a length of metal pipe within reach. I grabbed it and swung it with all my might, connecting with his arm. The wrench clattered to the ground, and he howled in pain. Seizing the moment, I sprinted towards the door, not daring to look back until I was safely outside. My heart pounded against my chest like a drum, my breath visible in the cold air as I hurried away from the warehouse. I didn't stop running until the industrial area was a mere silhouette against the night sky. Once home, I locked the doors and promised myself to never take that shortcut again. Story number 3. I'd been living in my new apartment for just a few weeks when I started noticing something was off about the parking garage at night. It was supposed to be secure, accessible only to residents with a key card. Yet there were nights where I would hear footsteps echoing off the concrete walls, heavy and deliberate, long after the city had quieted down. Each time I checked, the sound would abruptly stop, leaving behind a chilling silence as if the air was holding its breath. One particularly dark evening, after working late, I pulled into the garage, feeling the familiar creep of unease as the fluorescent lights flickered overhead. As I parked, the sound of footsteps started again, this time closer than ever. Gripping my keys tightly, I tried to convince myself it was just another resident, perhaps someone with a similar schedule. But as I locked my car and turned to head towards the elevator, I realized the footsteps had not only continued, but seemed to be mirroring my own. Heart racing, I quickened my pace, the sound of the following steps matching mine beat for beat. I spun around abruptly, and for a split second, I saw a shadow dart behind a pillar. This wasn't my imagination. Somebody was there. Trying to control my rising panic, I called out, "Who's there? This isn't funny." My voice echoed. The only reply was the hum of the distant traffic. The silence that followed was suffocating, oppressive, as if the night itself was closing in around me. Deciding that I couldn't ignore my instincts any longer, I sprinted towards the elevator, slamming the call button repeatedly. Behind me, the footsteps erupted into a run, pounding on the concrete with a menacing intensity. I glanced back to see a figure, broad-shouldered and looming, emerging from the shadows. There was nothing friendly in the way he moved. His pace quickened as he drew closer. The elevator dinged open at the last moment, and I threw myself inside, hammering the door close button. As the doors slid shut, the figure reached out, his hand slamming against the metal with a thud that resonated in the confined space. Breathing heavily, I watched through the crack as the door sealed shut, his obscured face just inches from mine. I had never seen him before, and he didn't look like any of my neighbors. Shaken, I reported the incident to the building management the next morning, but they found no unauthorized entries in the security logs. From then on, I made sure to change my schedule, never parking in the same spot twice. The garage remained a place of wary passage, always reminding me of the night that I was almost caught. Story number 4. I had taken a new job in a remote logging camp located deep within the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. The job offered good pay and the solitude I craved after a bustling city life. The camp was small, a tight-knit community of workers, and I was the new guy. My role as a night watchman was simple: ensure the security of equipment and the supplies after sundown. The work was straightforward until one evening, when a dense fog rolled in from the woods, enveloping the camp in a thick blanket that seemed to swallow sound. As I made my rounds, the beam from my flashlight barely penetrated the fog, and the familiar path seemed alien, distorted by the mist. It was then I first noticed the discrepancies. Logs and tools moved from their original places, as if rearranged by unseen hands. I reported the anomalies to the foreman, who shrugged it off as forgetfulness or pranks among the crew. But the disturbances grew more frequent, and one night the uneasy feeling that had been gnawing at me reached its peak. As I walked past the storage shed, the padlock was undone, swinging gently in the breeze. I entered cautiously, flashlight scanning the dark interior. That's when I heard it. A slow, deliberate, scraping sound coming from outside. I stepped back into the night, my heart pounding as I followed the noise. It led me towards the edge of the camp, where the trees stood like silent sentinels in the fog. There, obscured by the mist, was the outline of a person, dragging a large sack behind him. "Hey!" I called out, my voice firm. "Stop right there!" The figure halted, then slowly turned. It was a man, his features rugged and weather-beaten, wearing tattered old logger's clothes. "This doesn't concern you," he rasped, his voice as rough as the bark of the trees surrounding us. "Leave now, you'll regret it." His warning was clear, his stance threatening. Refusing to back down, I stepped closer, demanding he explain himself. In response, he dropped the sack and advanced. I could see he held a logger's hook, its sharp end glinting ominously in the dim light. My own hand moved to the radio at my belt, but I knew help would take time to arrive. The standoff escalated quickly as he lunged, forcing me to dive aside, narrowly avoiding the hook. Scrambling to my feet, I managed to disarm him with a swift kick. After a tense struggle, I subdued him until help arrived. The man was a former logger, presumed lost after wandering into the woods years ago. His mind had been unhinged by isolation, or perhaps something darker within the forest. As for me, I never walked the camp's perimeter without company again, always wary of what might lurk just beyond the light of my flashlight. Story number 5. I moved into an old neighborhood on the quieter side of town, lured by the affordable rent and the charm of the historic homes. The house next to mine had been empty since I arrived, its overgrown garden and peeling paint giving it a forsaken look. It wasn't long before I learned from local gossip that it was considered the quote-unquote haunted house of the street, avoided due to its eerie atmosphere and the stories of strange occurrences reported by previous occupants. Despite my skepticism, the tales intrigued me. My interest peaked late one autumn evening when, from my bedroom window, I noticed a faint light flickering through the curtains of the supposedly empty house. It was odd, but I dismissed it as perhaps security lights malfunctioning, or maybe kids daring each other inside. However, the light appeared again the next night, and this time it was accompanied by shadows moving across the curtained windows. Driven by a mix of curiosity and concern that someone might be squatting there, I decided to investigate. I waited until daylight, thinking it safer and less likely to encounter anyone who might wish me harm. As I approached the house, the air grew inexplicably cold, and the faint, musty smell of decay was quite noticeable as I pushed open the creaking front door. Inside, the house was shrouded in dust, and each step stirred up the silence of years. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice echoed back at me, hollow and jarring. As I ventured deeper, the floorboards groaning under my feet, I noticed something strange. Despite this thick layer of dust covering most surfaces, there were fresh footprints that weren't mine leading to the basement door. Trepidation gripped me, but I pressed on, following the footprints down the creaky basement stairs. The air grew colder with each step, and I could hear the soft, distinct whispers of voices discussing fervently, too low to make out the words. The conversation ceased abruptly as I reached the basement floor, and I found myself in a room that looked recently used, with candles burnt down to stubs and old furniture pushed aside, as if to clear a space. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me, and I spun around to see a figure, obscured in the dim light, standing between me and the only exit. "You shouldn't have come here," the figure spoke in a grave tone, stepping towards me. I backed away, heart racing, and without thinking, I dashed to a small, half-open window, managing to escape just as the figure lunged towards me. Once outside, I didn't stop running until I reached the safety of my own home. I called the police, but when they checked, the house was empty, no sign of any recent habitation. They dismissed it as a prank, but the encounter left me shaken. I never looked at the old house the same way again, always wondering about the voices and the figure that wanted me gone. From then on, I made sure to keep my distance, the mystery of the house next door remaining just that, a mystery.